Welcome to another episode of A Quest for Twice. Today is October 20th. Yesterday, Kinder Morgan reported its Q3 earnings, so I'm going to provide a quick update here. I use this table to keep track of the key business and financial performances of Kinder Morgan. As can be seen in the top row, there is very little change to all the key metrics I am keeping track of. The forecasted 2022 EBITDA is still around $7.5 billion. Its valuation level is 9.6 over this year's EBITDA. And this year's DCF will be slightly above $4.9 billion, same as the update from 1 quarter ago. And there is no change to the capex update. The forward dividend is about 6.15%, and that's about 200 basis points higher than the current 10-year Treasury yield of 4.15%. So that's another way to look at the valuation level for Kinder Morgan. The 200 basis points is considered the risk premium, which is considered reasonable. So if the 10-year Treasury rate continue to increase, then we should see the dividend yield for Kinder Morgan to increase. If Kinder Morgan cannot increase the actual dividend amount, then its stock price will have to come down. So that is a risk to Kinder Morgan's stock price. Other than that, there is really no much update. This is also a good time to look at the latest DNV energy outlook. In DNV's model, the future energy demand is driven by population growth, GDP growth per capita, and efficiency gain. So those several factors depicted in the two charts at the bottom. On the left, that's a 2021 outlook. On the right is the latest outlook in October 2022. Although they look similar at the first glimpse, if we look at the information closely, we can see that for the latest outlook, the primary energy growth, that's the dots in the chart, is over 1% in the 5 years from 2020 to 2025, compared to less than 0.5% in the last year's outlook. That's driven by the GDP per capita growth, much higher than the previous outlook. Another subtle but also very important difference is for the 5-year period between 2030 to 2035. The latest outlook is positive for primary energy growth, compared to a negative growth in the previous outlook. As a result, it will take longer for primary energy demand to peak. So with that background in mind, let's look at the model forecast of the primary energy demand. Again, on the right is a 2022 forecast compared to the forecast from last year on the left. So we can see that in the latest forecast, the demand is actually noticeable higher, approaching 500 EJ per year comparing to the past. And also it stays flat from 2035 to 2050. Now let's review the world oil demand. On the right, that's the latest forecast comparing to the forecast from 1 year ago. You can see the total oil demand will peak higher and decline slower compared to previous forecasts. For example, in the year of 2030, the demand will be higher than 80 million barrels per day, comparing to about 80 million barrels per day in the previous forecast. And in the year of 2030, the demand will be close to 60 compared to below 50 in the previous forecast. Last year's forecast actually was already an upward revision in terms of total oil demand. So DNV is continuously revising up the world oil demand from one year to the next. Basically, DNV was too optimistic in the past about the pace of the energy transition. It will not happen as fast as it modeled 2 years ago or last year. On the other hand, the world gas production now is forecasted less compared to the forecast from last year. So we can see the latest forecast on the right compared to the forecast from 1 year ago on the left. The peak demand is about the same between those two forecasts, but we can see some depression in terms of production in between 2025 and 2030. That was not there in the previous forecast. And also, the gas production would decline faster to less than 4 trillion cubic meters per year in 2050, compared to previous forecast that was just above 4 tm per year. The main driver behind the reduced supply was from Russia due to its invasion in Ukraine and the resulting higher price. That will encourage the world, especially European countries, to accelerate the pace in energy transition, focusing on substitute of energy from natural gas, for example, wind power and solar, as well as accelerate energy efficiency gain from other means, including heat pumps. When I went back to the comparison I made last year between the 2021 forecast and the 2020 forecast, I noticed that the 2021 forecast reduced the world gas production forecast from the forecast made in 2020. So there is a general trend of less production in its latest forecast. I invest a significant portion of my portfolio in midstream companies, including Energy Transfer and Kinder Morgan. So does the reduced outlook for natural gas production make me pessimistic about the longevity of the midstream assets? Not quite, for the reasons I'm going to outline here. First one is natural gas pipeline and storage can provide a dispatchable energy source. So right now, people think about the natural gas flow as steady. So the storage capacity is mostly used to smooth out the demand between spring and fall versus the summer and winter when the demand become greater. However, with renewable energy taking up a larger share in the future energy supply, there will be more inter-week, even inter-day variations in energy demand. And natural gas storage will be able to provide that buffer to smooth out the supply variations. On top of that, the natural gas may even include blended hydrogen for electricity generation and make its carbon footprint less. The second reason about the longevity of midstream assets is that green hydrogen can be stored in repurposed methane gas sites. As we know, it's very difficult to store electricity energy for long durations. A battery storage is usually only good for 2 to 4 hours. Otherwise, it won't be economic. However, the green energy can be used to generate hydrogen, so-called green hydrogen. And that green hydrogen then can be stored, and most likely will be stored in repurposed natural gas sites. And also green hydrogen or hydrogen from other sources will need to be moved around in the future to meet the demand at a location different from the hydrogen generation. And it's forecasted that 50% of future hydrogen pipeline will be repurposed from natural gas pipeline, because that's only 10 to 35% of a new construction cost. And finally, the natural gas storage sites can also be repurposed for CO2 storage from CCS. So even if future supply and demand of natural gas may become reduced, the midstream assets can still have other use besides for natural gas storage and transportation. For these reasons, I remain optimistic about the long-term future of energy transfer and Kinder Morgan. This concludes the latest episode of A Quest for Twice. Until next time, happy investing.